Today I'm going to talk about the beast and the false prophet, how it relates to Christianity, and why judgment is coming upon the last generation of Christianity. So I'm going to go to Revelation 13. John sees many visions, and this was one of them. And folks, you must remember that just like when Pharaoh saw a vision of 7 fat cows and 7 lean cows, and the rest, that didn't mean that there would be literal, that you understand how Joseph was able to interpret the dream. It's not hard to understand this, okay? So, let's start in verse 1, Revelation 13. And I stood upon the sand of the sea. Which sea did he stand upon? Do you know which sea it was? The Mediterranean Sea, of course. Okay? And I saw a beast rise up out of the sea. Get your Google Maps out and look at the Mediterranean Sea. Okay, let's continue. Having 7 heads and 10 horns, and upon his horns, 10 crowns. And upon his heads the name of blasphemy. Okay, let's continue. And the beast which I saw was like unto a leopard, and his feet was as the feet of a bear, and his mouth as the mouth of a lion. And the dragon gave him his power and his seat. And great authority. And I saw one of his heads, as it were, wounded to death, and his deadly wound was healed, and all the world wondered after the beast. And they worshipped the dragon, which gave power unto the beast, and they worshipped the beast, saying, Who is like unto the beast, and who is able to make war with him? And there was given unto him a mouth speaking great things and blasphemies, much like Antiochus 4. And power was given to him to continue 42 months. And he opened his mouth in blasphemy against Jehovah, to blaspheme his name and his tabernacle and them that dwell in heaven. What is that 42 months? Well, a lot of people believe that it is the so-called Great Tribulation of the last days. Okay? But the fact of the matter is that 42 months was when Nero ordered the destruction of Jerusalem. And he was given 7 years to do it. Vespasian and Titus were given 7 years to do it, and they got it done in 42 months. And not only that, once they destroyed it, they put their fortress on top and built walls. Fortress walls. One of them still up today. And it was, I believe, if I understand, if I remember correctly, it was in honor of Apollyon, the destroyer. Apollo. Okay. And see, verse 7 goes right along with verse 5 and 6. And it was given unto him to make war with the saints. That is the holy people. That is the Jews. They were in Jerusalem. This was... I will go to this fact. Here's what I'll do. Matthew. I didn't want to interject with this, but I will go ahead and do it. Okay. Matthew 23 and verse 34. Yeshua, not Jesus, not Jesus, Yeshua or Yehoshua, said, wherefore, behold, I send unto you prophets and wise men and scribes, and some of them you shall kill and crucify, and some of them shall you scourge in your synagogues and persecute them from city to city. So that, listen folks carefully. See, the problem is with Christianity is they can only see their enemy, the Jew, but they can't see themselves. Okay? So that upon you come all the righteous blood shed upon the earth, from the blood of Abel unto the blood of Zechariah the son of Bacharias, whom you slew between the temple and the altar. Now listen very carefully. Verse 36, verily I say unto you, all these things shall come upon this generation. That's it. That generation. And who was it that executed this curse upon that generation? Was it the Christians? No. It was the pagans. Still the Romans, but pagans. Now we will go back to Revelation. This Revelation 13 from 5 through 9 is speaking of pagan Rome. Then it says, in sort of an aftermath, sort of an afterthought, how do I put this, a comforting thought. He that leads into captivity, Rome, shall go into captivity. He that kills with the sword, this was at the time, listen very carefully folks, I'm trying to get something across here. At the time, this is only referring to the pagan Romans. He that kills with the sword must be killed with the sword. Here is the patience and the faith of the holy people, the Jews. So the Jews would have to wait patiently for the shoe to be on the other foot, you see. Oh, and now we have this guy. Verse 11. And I beheld another beast come up out of the earth, and he had 2 horns like a lamb, and he spoke as a dragon, and he exercised power. The same power of the first beast before him. Who was the first beast before him? They sit on the same seat. It was before Christianity came into power. That was the first beast before him. and caused the earth and them which dwell therein to worship the first beast, whose deadly wound was healed. Now, Rome at one time was destroyed. Do I know of a certainty that's what that means? No, I don't. Does anybody? Probably not. But something happened. Something did happen. Which I find very interesting with Napoleon. You see, Napoleon deposed the man at the Vatican. I don't have a biblical explanation for this, but he literally, by the sword, deposed the man at the Vatican. And that man at the Vatican did not receive any power again until Adolf Hitler and Benito Mussolini came into power. I find this to be very interesting because it connotes 1948. I'll get to that in a little bit, because I've got some things to cover here. And this is going to be a long video. Hope I've got enough room. I may have to break it up. So what we have here is, how do I put this? The Caesar portion of Rome, if you will, is already condemned by verse 10. Okay? And it's backed up in Daniel 9 and verse 27. Verse 11, I beheld another beast coming up out of the earth. He had 2 horns like a lamb, and he spoke as a dragon. Now, horns seem to depict, and for a while, I was confused about what this meant, and I'm not 100% sure that I understand this, but even today, the so-called, how do I put this, pontiff situation is actually 2. One in Rome and the other one in, used to be in Constantinople. Okay? And he spoke like a dragon, and he exercised all the power of the first beast before him, and caused the earth and them that dwell therein to worship the first beast, whose deadly wound was healed. And he does great wonders, so that he makes fire come out of heaven on the earth in sight of men. And so, what I wonder about is, if you recall, Adolf Hitler, Mussolini, the man who reinstated the pontiff at the Vatican, what were they doing? They were causing fire to come out of heaven. They were bombing Europe. They were bombing Great Britain from the sky. Okay? And he deceived them that dwell on the earth by the means of those wonders, not miracles, wonders, which he had power to do in the sight of the beast. He did in the sight of Europe. Possibly. Well, probably. I believe it was bombing Europe. I believe that's what this means. By airplanes. And then he said saying to them that dwell on the earth or on the land, that they should make an image unto the beast. Now, it was Gregory, which Gregory I can't remember, you can look it up, who had an image of the beast made, or had an image made. The image being long-haired son of Gregory, the pontiff. Painted by Leonardo da Vinci. And of course, his graven images are all over the earth today. Now, as far as how it says the image of the beast should both speak and cause as many that would not worship the image of the beast should be killed. Well, indeed, Jews, from the time of the first, I don't know, when they first started making this graven image, would never bow down and worship the image in church. And because of that, they were killed. And he caused all, both small and great, and rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand or in their forehead. Remember I explained about on Ash Wednesday, they put the mark of the beast on their forehead, and when they pray, they make the mark of the beast with their right hand. This is what they do. This is the vast majority of Christianity does this. And that no man might buy or sell save he had the mark or not and. All he had to do was have the mark on Ash Wednesday. Or the name of the beast, that's Christos, because that's what the mark represents, or the number of his name represents, or the number of his name. What is the number of his name? It is X, and it means XTN, or Christos, okay? Then it says, here's wisdom, then it has understanding, count the number of the beast. Well, it's very simple, it's 10. It's not 666. And it is a number of a man. Christos it is a counterfeit of Messiah. Christos connotes a Gentile replacement that was that the name was assigned to others before Yeshua Messiah. You see. Its number is not 666, I have proven. It's so easy to prove. You cannot make the 666 match what John saw. You can look up what John saw. It's also the Bismillah. Bismillah, the Muslims have it, and it's that same emblem is sitting up at the Vatican. But the number of his name, that is the first numeral, it's X. It's 10. Okay, where am I going with this? I saw something this morning on the Jerusalem Post. And I hope it doesn't take too long for me to read this. Probably not. Okay. So an article in the Jerusalem Post is talking about the National Review columnist defends the Spanish Inquisition. This is by Ben Sales, and it's posted this morning on the Jerusalem Post. So he says, to be clear, this is not Monty Python. This is a column in the National Review. Here's the headline. The Spanish Inquisition was a moderate court by the standard of its time. Moderate? We'll run down some basic facts about this infamous, brutal, centuries-long persecution of the Jews below. But first, let us read some of the takes from the column by Ed Condon, who was identified as a writer, editor, and practicing canon lawyer. While any reasonable person would find a lot not to like about the Spanish Inquisition, writes Condon, in perhaps the understatement of the year, in fact, examined simply as a functioning court, the Spanish Inquisition was in many ways ahead of its time and a pioneer of many judicial practices we now take for granted. Let's start with the basic legal concept of an inquisition. It means a court of inquiry in which judges take the lead in directing proceedings in the pursuit of the truth rather than a prosecution-driven adversarial system. Such courts continue to function in many secular jurisdictions today, and there is, frankly, nothing sinister about it, though it appears alien to those of us raised on American courtroom dramas. Condon goes on to claim that the Inquisition was actually a reluctant creation of the church. to condemn Tomás de Torquemada, Spain's infamous Grand Inquisitor, was a man much more nuanced historical figure than the cartoonish portrayal of him suggests. He calls the Inquisition's use of torture, wait for it, downright progressive. Condon goes on to claim that the Inquisition was actually a reluctant I read that already. He also writes that the jails of the Inquisition were universally known to be hygienic and well maintained. Astonishingly, Condon said that the Inquisition was created to protect the Spanish Jews who were forced to convert to Christianity under the threat of expulsion or death. The Pope hoped, perhaps naively, that by getting directly involved, the church could bring the situation under control and end the frenzied religious denunciation, Condon writes. They always try to defend the guy at the Vatican. Unbelievable. He acknowledges that the idea didn't quite go as planned, but blames the Spanish monarchy for hijacking the Inquisition. But then he says Torquemada brought it under control and set up a relatively fair justice system. He writes that the Inquisition courts were fairer than the Spanish courts. That last point very well may be true, but who cares? I know I don't. And I'll get to the reason why in just a minute. During the Inquisition, actually I'll get to it right now. The man on the Jerusalem Post is going to get to it right now. During the Inquisition, which wasn't abolished until the early 19th century, hundreds of thousands were forced into exile, and thousands were converted under duress. Tens of thousands were murdered. Why? Because they would not put the mark of the beast on their forehead on Ash Wednesday, and they would not make the mark of the beast with their right hand. That's why. It was a reign of terror that persecuted people based on their religion and significantly their race. Even pious Catholics with Jewish roots were targeted. And not to leave my place here, but that's the reason why the Anabaptists were targeted too. Think about it. Once the identity of the accused individuals was established, they would be seized, thrust into inquisitional dungeons, interrogated occasionally under torture, and sentenced to a variety of punishments ranging from terms of penitential service to imprisonment or to relaxation. Relaxation, that is death. Howard Sachar wrote in his book, Farewell España, the world of the Sephardim remembered. And by the way, yes, FTDNA found out that I have at least 5% Sephardim blood in me. Thus, even in its earliest phase between 1479 and 1481, in a ferocious reign of terror, nearly 400 individuals were burned at the stake for heresy in the city of Seville alone, Sachar continued. Throughout Castilian and Andalusian, some 2,000 persons were burned alive. 17,000 others were reconciled, that is, spared the death penalty, but subject to such punishments as imprisonment, confiscation of property. Yes, they could, listen carefully, folks, and debarment from all employment, public and private. What does that mean? They were not allowed to buy and sell. We just read that in Revelation 13, didn't we? And their wives and their children faced destitution. The Inquisitors were particularly vicious. Now it's resetting itself. Come on, Jerusalem Post. Were particularly vicious in their treatment of conversos. What do you mean by conversos? The Jews who were under duress, forced to convert, were treated even more harshly. Yes. Or converts who were suspected of practicing Judaism in secret. In all, some 30,000 conversos were burned at the stake. On Malachora, 82 conversos were condemned in 1691. 34 were publicly garroted and their bodies were burned in bonfires. Another 3, including a rabbi, were burned alive. In 2011, Malachora's regional president offered the country's first formal apology of the Inquisition's killing of Jews. Benjamin Netanyahu, the late father of Israeli Prime Minister and scholar of the Inquisition, did assert that King Ferdinand backed the Inquisition in part to prevent a wider popular bloodbath. But Netanyahu also insisted that in its purveyor's deadly pursuit of racial purity, the Inquisition was a precursor to the Holocaust. So Benjamin Netanyahu's own father backs up my insistence that the Holocaust happened over and over and over again. And this last one was the final one. Over. And like I said, for a brief period, Napoleon deposed the man at the Vatican, and he freed the Jews. Yes, he did. Look it up. Here's how he did it. The Jews were automatically considered slaves in Europe. And so when Napoleon took power and deposed the man at the Vatican, he then told the Jews, look, all you have to do is get yourself a last name, a surname, like the rest of us, and you will be a beneficiary of his signing of emancipation of the Jews. So he emancipated the Jews. Napoleon did. And made it so they could leave. Finally leave. And many came westward. Now, unfortunately, the man at the Vatican was brought back, and with him, Adolf Hitler, Benito Mussolini. And for what reason I'll never understand, the Christians of Europe will always defend the honor of the man at the Vatican, saying it wasn't him, it was everybody else. Oh no, it was him. It was him. It was Adolf Hitler and Mussolini who gave him power. Now, in 1948, Israel became a state. When you read in Matthew where it said that the righteous blood shed upon the earth from the blood of righteous Abel unto the blood of Zechariah, son of Bechariah, whom you slew between the temple and the altar, I say all these things shall come upon this generation. What happened 70 years after he made that statement? It came upon that generation, did it not? It was 70 years later. So I have a question. Who now is going to absorb the curse of the blood that was shed from 70 AD to 1948. The blood of the Jews. We just read about the first beast, about the beast, that whomsoever kills with the sword is going to die by the sword. This is what the Jews, the saints, are patiently waiting for. Well, if you count from 1948, and you count 70, I'm not saying it's 70 years. A generation is 100 years. But what I find interesting is it happened 70 years the first time, and a reasonable person can conclude that it could happen the second time to the Gentiles, to the Europeans, to Rome, in 70 years from the time that Israel was declared a nation. So let's count 70 years. On May 14, 1948, David Ben-Gurion, head of the Jewish Agency, proclaimed the establishment of the State of Israel. U.S. President Harry S. Truman recognized a new nation on the same day. "70 years is up, and when you look at what's happening to Israel, on the mountains of Israel, the Golan Heights, the Russians, for the first time, are staring Israel in the face, eyeball to eyeball, at the Golan Heights. I find it very interesting that that is happening this year, 70 years from the time Israel got its independence in 1948. So, I guess my point is this. The curse was supposed to come upon the Rome who destroyed Jerusalem. Christianity did not have to follow in the murderous footsteps of their pagan forefathers. They didn't have to do it. It was prophesied that they would. Prophecy must come to pass. But you see, folks, individuals are also responsible. Yes? You make that little mark on your forehead. I don't. You put that mark on your forehead and you're cursed. You make it with your right hand and you're cursed. You are subjected to the curse of the murderer. The murderers. You see, it was only on that generation in 70 AD. That's it. You see, so when the Christians took over Rome and decided that they wanted to continue what the pagans had done, they then placed that curse upon themselves. And now, let's see. Now, I'll see if I can find this. There we go. Revelation 18 and verse 24. Just like what Yeshua Messiah said in Matthew 23 and verse 36, it says that upon you may come all the righteous blood shed upon the earth, from the righteous blood of Abel unto the blood of Zechariah, son of Bechariah. Now we go to Revelation 18:24, and we see blame, a curse falling upon a great city. Verse 20, rejoice over her, you heaven, you holy apostles and prophets. So starting from the apostles until the end. Beginning with the apostles until all those who were murdered on it. Listen, watch me. Watch this. For Jehovah has avenged you on her. A mighty angel took up a stone like a great millstone and cast it into the sea. In which sea? The Mediterranean Sea, my friends. Saying, thus with violence shall that great city, Babylon, be thrown down, and shall be found no more at all, and the voice of harpers and musicians and of flutists and trumpeters shall be heard no more at all in you, and no craftsman of whatever craft shall be found any more in you, and the sound of a millstone shall be no longer heard at all in you, and the light of the lamp shall no more shine on you at all in you, and the voice of the bridegroom and the bride shall be no more heard at all in you, for your merchants were the great men of the earth, for by your sorceries were all nations deceived. Verse 24, and here it is, folks. And in her was found the blood of the prophets and of the Jews. The saints are the Jews, and all who were slain upon the earth. So, from the apostles until 1948, folks, or until the Messianic era begins, all of the blood of all those who were killed on the earth is falling upon Rome. Now, there were two Romes. One was Constantinople. That one already fell. And then there is Rome itself. And that one is going to fall too. And all of those who are partakers of Rome's crimes against the Jews are going to suffer the punishment of Rome. Period. Just like the inhabitants of Jerusalem, just like the Jews suffered, so now will all Rome and all her constituents around the world suffer. The shoe is going to be on the other foot, and it will happen when Rome is no longer persecuting. Isaiah 33. Woe unto you, you destroyer, you Apollyon, you. And you weren't spoiled and dealt treacherously. But the Jews didn't deal treacherously with you. When you shall cease to spoil, you shall be spoiled. That's right. Has Rome ceased to spoil? Yes. They ceased to spoil in 1948. When you shall make an end to deal treacherously, and this is treacherously in a violent way, they shall deal treacherously with you. This is the curse upon Rome, upon Europe, and it shall happen when they are no longer able, or when they are no longer spoilers. There you have it, folks.